How far would a loving mother go to protect her only child? In the shining heart of a prosperous African metropolis, among lush gardens and imposing mansions, lived Madame Nana, a woman respected for her dignity, wisdom, and resilience. Although she had become the wife of a business tycoon, and together they had built a vast enterprise, her heart remained anchored to one irreplaceable treasure, her son, Kwame. Years of tireless work and careful planning had Madame Nana and her late husband had devoted themselves to raising Kwame with equal parts affection and discipline. He was never allowed to drift away on the tides of privilege. Instead, their love was a gentle, consistent current that guided him from boyhood to the threshold of manhood. Kwame's life was defined by opportunity. He had studied abroad, encountering new worlds of knowledge and culture, shaping himself into a young man of finesse and gentle manners, now ready to inherit his father's legacy and shoulder the weight of an empire. But beneath the glittering surface of Madame Nana's world, a shadow crept in. With Kwame returning home for the first time since his father's passing, her thoughts twisted around one persistent worry. Whom would he choose for a life companion? Madame Nana had seen the patterns repeated in circles of wealth. Flocks of dazzling women attracted to power. Envious eyes seeking a slice of affluence. But beneath their manicured beauty, she sensed an emptiness, a hunger for riches rather than genuine love. Subscribe and hit like. Our powerful stories add years to your life. Join our Story Lovers Club and let us know in the comments, where are you listening from? Her motherly instincts, refined through years of navigating the subtle politics of success, warned her against letting her son be ensnared in a superficial romance. She recalled late-night stories told by friends of men robbed of joy by partners who valued luxury more than loyalty. And so, Madame Nana began plotting. She needed to see with her own eyes. Beyond the glimmer of gold and painted smiles, she needed to discover who, among the women surrounding her son, possessed a heart worthy of his love. Thus, in the quiet, violet light of an early morning, Madame Nana transformed herself. She donned a faded wrapper, its colors dulled by time, over an old blouse. Her headscarf slipped crookedly over her brow, and on her feet she wore simple rubber slippers. In one hand, a mop, in the other, a battered plastic bucket. As she entered the family company's gleaming offices, she was no longer the revered matriarch, but just another invisible cleaner. The air was thick with anticipation. Around her, polished floors glistened, expensive perfumes competed, but none noticed the disguised queen as she crossed the silent threshold. The sight of the old woman in her humble attire was met first with silence, then ripples of mocking laughter. The office's atmosphere, previously punctuated by the effortless click of high heels and the perfume of ambition, turned brittle. "Who let this woman in here?" demanded Linda, one of the most outspoken among the staff, nose recoiling in disgust. Anita, Her confidant and partner in gossip chimed in. Maybe she lost her way coming from the village. Together, their disdain swept through the room like cold wind, prompting others to join in the ridicule. But Madame Nana was prepared. She kept her gaze low, pushing the mop with deliberate steadiness, reminding herself not to react, to remain unseen, unheard, her pride hidden beneath years of experience. She felt the sting of their laughter. Once, she had commanded respect from rooms like this. Now, she was just another face in worn cloth, judged by appearance rather than character. She observed quietly as Linda and Anita relished their moment, their smiles brittle and superficial. Amidst the cacophony, someone stood apart. At her desk, Wendy, a junior staff member, kept her head down, focused on documents and numbers, untouched by the ugliness unfolding around them. There was no pity in her eyes for the cleaner, only simple human respect, the kind so rare and precious among strangers. Madame Nana noted this with interest, sensing the stirrings of something different, something genuine. Perhaps, she thought, this girl would be worth watching. The subtle decency of her actions spoke volumes louder than mockery or shallow kindness. By the next sunrise, office life resumed its predictable rhythm. Perfumes hovered in the air, laughter floated through corridors, and high heels marked the passage of ambition. Madame Nana, unchanged in faded clothes and aching body, worked quietly near the hallway. She steeled herself against exhaustion, a physical pain that paled in comparison to the emotional weight she bore, knowing everything here was a facade. She was determined to see her plan through, whatever the cost. Just as Madame Nana reached down for her mop, a sharp, commanding voice shattered her concentration. "Old woman, you missed a spot." It was Anita once again, standing with Linda, their arms folded, eyes sparkling with amusement. Their sneers held no concealment. "Did you not hear her? Or are you deaf?" Linda added with a smirk. Madame Nana swallowed her pride, ignoring the provocation, as she tried to resume her cleaning. But Anita pressed further, her laughter growing louder. Suddenly, Anita shoved Madame Nana, sending her frail body sprawling. Her hands failed to catch her, and she hit the cold tiles with a painful thud. The laughter erupted all around, cruel and shrill, as other women watched with satisfaction. Remarks flew. "She's so slow. Maybe she needs a walking stick," another joked, nudging her friend with an elbow. Embarrassed and bruised, Madame Nana struggled to rise, her trembling hands clutching the wet floor, the scent of sweat and old soap rising from her worn clothes. In this moment of humiliation, not a single person moved to help, except for Wendy. Unprompted, Wendy quickly walked over, kneeling beside Madame Nana and gripping her arm with surprising strength. "Are you okay, Mama?" she asked softly, her tone layered with concern and respect. The other office workers exchanged amused glances and derisive comments, but Wendy ignored them all, choosing instead to focus on Madame Nana's well-being. She picked up the cleaning rag, squeezed out the excess water, and gently handed it to the older woman. As Madame Nana accepted the wet cloth, tears stung her eyes, not from pain, but from the unexpected tenderness that Wendy offered. It had been years, maybe decades, since anyone addressed her as Mama with authentic warmth. Since her husband's passing, she had endured loneliness and grief behind closed doors, hiding her vulnerability beneath the armor of business. This moment of genuine kindness offered by a stranger prickled her soul in ways the ridicule could not. Wendy's simple actions had begun to shift something inside Madame Nana. She saw not just decency, but strength, the kind that withstands peer pressure, the courage to stand apart from cruelty. As Anita and Linda returned to their desks, giggling and reapplying lipstick, Madame Nana found comfort in the quiet presence of Wendy. She realized her plan might uncover more than just a worthy daughter-in-law. It might reveal the rare gold of humanity that wealth alone cannot buy. The next morning, Madame Nana continued her routine, feeling the accumulated aches in her joints, but determined to persevere. The office was lively, alive with gossip and bright colors. Women discussing the latest drama with exaggerated laughter. This day, however, was special. Madame Nana had spent hours the previous night preparing a traditional dish, a meal that spoke quietly of heritage and family. Groundnut soup with fufu, rich with peanut paste and fragrant spices, made the way her ancestors taught her. Entering the break room where junior staff gathered, she placed the bowl on the table, letting the aroma fill the air. With deliberate slowness, she served herself and began to eat. Every movement exuding humility and the pride of simple pleasures. Almost immediately, Linda, Anita, and their clique wandered in, their perfectly styled hair and designer nails contrasting with the cleaner, hunched over her modest bowl. "What's that smell?" Winda complained, her nose wrinkled in contempt. Anita peered at the meal, her lips curled with distaste. "Cleaner food," she said loudly, earning the laughter of her friends. They mocked Madame Nana, dismissed her meal as local, oblivious to the layers of history and love behind it. Unfazed, Madame Nana continued to eat, pretending not to hear. Moments later, Wendy entered, her steps light but sure, holding her lunchbox. A simple meal of jollof rice, neither extravagant nor concerned with appearances. She noticed the tension instantly, but chose to cross the room and sit beside Madame Nana. "Good afternoon, Mama," she greeted, her warmth a shield against the chill of derision. Madame Nana's heart softened. She offered Wendy some of her food, half expecting the young woman to refuse out of embarrassment or fear of ridicule. Instead, Wendy's eyes brightened, and upon tasting the dish, she smiled with genuine delight. "This is amazing, Mama. It tastes like home," she said. For Madame Nana, this was a powerful sign. Wendy hadn't cared about status, hadn't flinched at the prospect of sharing a meal with someone the world deemed lowly. She savored not just the food, but the experience, the connection that transcended class, the respect for tradition, and the wisdom of elders. Through these subtle tests, Madame Nana forged a growing bond with Wendy. Watching as the girl's character flourished in small acts of kindness and courage, Later that evening, Madame Nana prepared for her next test. In the ladies' washroom, she accidentally spilled an entire bucket of soapy water across the tiled floor. With a calculated gasp, she clutched her waist and cried out in pain. Anita and her clique arrived almost at once, faces twisted in amusement at the spectacle. Their voices dripped with sarcasm. "Oh no, the poor old woman fell again," Anita mocked, barely concealing her glee, while Linda said, "She's too old for this. She should just quit." Madame Nana, feigning distress, pleaded for help. "Please, someone help me." But Anita's arms remained folded, her voice haughty. "We're not cleaners," she declared. "It's not our job." Laughter filled the room. It was then that Wendy walked in. For a brief moment, the space was suspended in silence. She surveyed the scene, Madame Nana groaning on the slippery floor, surrounded by giggling women, refusing to lift a finger. Would Wendy shrink away, fearing humiliation by association? Would she overlook the suffering of another to preserve her own dignity? Without hesitation, Wendy knelt beside Madame Nana. "Are you okay, Mama?" Her words cut through the room's cruelty. Ignoring the jeers and stares, Wendy dipped her handkerchief in clean water and gently wiped Madame Nana's brow, then began cleaning the spill herself. Anita hissed at Wendy, incredulous. "She's not your mother!" But Wendy paid them no mind, focusing wholly on her task. When the floor was safe, Wendy helped Madame Nana to her feet and guided her to a chair. For Madame Nana, the moment swelled with emotion. She had been tested, humiliated, ignored. But here was a girl who wasn't afraid to stand apart. Wendy's compassion wasn't performative. It was woven from the threads of empathy and strength. Madame Nana knew, deep in her heart, that Wendy had passed the most crucial test so far. That night, long after the city's hum faded beneath the velvet dark, Madame Nana sat in her private chamber, lost in troubled reflection. The lamp on her desk cast elongated shadows, dancing across account books and family photos. A young Kwame, all wide eyes and bright promise. Herself and her late husband, hands entwined in better times. The day's events replayed in her mind, not the stings of ridicule, but the shining constancy of Wendy's quiet strength. The contrast between Wendy and the other women was growing ever clearer, painting the edges of Madame Nana's plan with new urgency. At the core of her worries lingered something more than her son's future. She thought of the legacy left by her husband, the hard-fought stability carved from decades of struggle. All her life, she'd watched people drawn to money like moths to flame. Some sincere, many predatory. Each careless laugh, each glinting manicure and unkind word from Linda and Anita reminded her of vultures circling estates, and she shuddered at the thought of Kwame entrusting his dreams and fortune to someone with a heart as shallow as their smiles. She pondered Wendy's future too. She saw in Wendy not only modesty and respect, but the potential of a young woman unburdened by greed or artifice. Wendy's eyes shone with determination and intelligence, qualities that would, in the right hands, blossom into wisdom. And how often, wondered Madame Nana, are good hearts overlooked simply because they don't shine with the luster of gold? Madame Nana's plan, the masquerade among her own staff, the deliberate humiliation, was her way to pierce through layers of societal performance, to see what truly resided inside. As dawn threatened the horizon with blushes of pink and orange, Madame Nana made a silent vow. She would intensify her tests, making the circumstances even more challenging for both herself and the staff. She wanted to be certain, absolutely certain, that whoever took Kwame's hand would do so for love, empathy, and unshakable principles. There was little sleep for Madame Nana that night. Her thoughts were 1,000 racing horses, galloping toward the uncertainty of tomorrow. Beneath it all, a single hope quietly pulsed, that in the end, honesty and kindness would reveal themselves strong. The gossip mill churned even harder around the prospect of the upcoming office ball, a celebration of the company's anniversary, attended by staff, family, and the city's elite. To Madame Nana, it was the perfect setting for her final test. She decided to let the cleaner, in her disguise, come and help serve during the ball, blending in among the service staff. Rumors about Kwame's return swirled through the office corridors like wildfire. Linda and Anita, in particular, redoubled their efforts to catch his eye. They gossiped about potential wife material, discussed the designers they'd wear, fought over the best seats at the banquet. None suspected that, behind the poor woman's headscarf and tired face, the matriarch herself watched, weighing every word and deed with piercing discernment. On the evening of the ball, the corporate headquarters gleamed like a palace. Gold ribbons hung from chandeliers. Music sparkled in every corner. Linda, Anita, and their friends arrived in breathtaking fashion, draped in sparkling gowns, layers of makeup, heels that tapped with restless anticipation. Wendy, on the other hand, wore a simple yet elegant dress, tasteful, unassuming, a reflection of her inner grace. As waitstaff hustled to distribute drinks and delicate canapes, Madame Nana busied herself among them, observing. When Kwame entered, tall in a tailored suit and glowing with the easy confidence of someone who'd seen the world, heads turned. He scanned the crowd, polite smile firmly in place, as distant relatives and business associates clustered around to congratulate him. Madame Nana watched as Linda tried to seize her moment. Her laughter a touch too loud, questions laced with flattery. Anita followed close, each compliment more extravagant than the last. But Kwame's responses stayed courteous, if a little distant. Then the matriarch noticed a quiet scene unfold. Wendy, standing at the edge, stepped forward not for attention, but to offer Kwame a plate of food. No affectation, only the simple thoughtfulness that marked her every action. Their eyes met, and a peaceful, natural smile blossomed between them. Though hidden by her disguise, Madame Nana's lips curled in satisfaction. The night was still young, but the final act was set. After the dinner, as music soared and laughter echoed beneath marble columns, Madame Nana noticed subtle tensions rising among the women. Linda, feeling sidelined, veered toward Wendy with a glass of punch in her hand and mischief flickering in her eyes. "Careful not to spill anything," she said, voice edged with sneer, loudly enough for nearby guests to overhear. The glint in Anita's gaze promised trouble. Madame Nana tensed as she watched from across the room, her fists clenching behind her back. She wanted to remain the impartial observer, to avoid intervening before her test had reached its peak. But the stakes were rising, and her heart hammered nervously beneath her costume. Intent on provoking a scene, Anita accidentally bumped her elbow into Wendy's plate, sending food cascading down Wendy's dress. Shock smothered the room, heads twisted toward the commotion. Linda cackled, her laughter shrill against the backdrop of string music. "Oh dear, so clumsy! Maybe leave the serving to the professionals," she exclaimed. Every fiber of Madame Nana's being cried out to defend Wendy, but she held back, eyes glistening with tears of regret for the cruelty these women could wield. Everyone watched for Wendy's reaction. Would she retaliate, slip away in humiliation, or break down under the public scorn? Instead, with a composure beyond her years, Wendy smiled and excused herself as gracefully as she could. "It's only a dress," she said, her dignity undimmed by insult. She brushed off the mess, found her composure, and quickly aided the other waitstaff to clean up the spill, never once looking for pity or vengeance. In that poised moment, she shone brighter than any crystal chandelier in the hall. Kwame noticed, and from across the room, pride sparkled in his eyes. Madame Nana, though still silent, felt the last of her doubts dissolve. Here was courage, not headline-grabbing or vengeful, but gentle, enduring, and quietly defiant. It was a simple but powerful act, the sort of human strength impossible to fake. As the incident faded, guests remembered not the stain on Wendy's dress, but the unyielding grace with which she bore it. After the ball, when crowds thinned and quiet blanketed the halls, Madame Nana retreated to her office, still disguised, to catch her breath. She did not expect Wendy would come searching for her, but the gentle rap on the door broke her reveries. "May I come in, Mama?" Wendy asked hesitantly, her hair slightly mussed, the stain on her dress only half faded. Madame Nana, heart beating fast, waved her in. They talked quietly, a real conversation, away from mocking eyes and company politics. Wendy never spoke ill of Anita or Linda, choosing instead to share small memories of her family, her dreams, her fears of never being enough amid a world obsessed with appearance and status. She confessed that some nights she considered quitting, but something always pulled. The story of her own journey, her struggles, her battles for dignity, the loneliness of widowhood, echoed in Wendy's confessions. With mounting certainty, she realized her son needed someone like this. A spirit both kind and unbreakable. A week after the ball, Madame Nana arranged a company-wide meeting, calling in every staff member. Her son Kwame, now curious about the rumors of strange happenings, sat beside her on the dais. The entire office buzzed with speculation. What would be announced now? Linda and Anita flashed nervous smiles, still counting themselves the most likely to secure favor with the family. When the room filled, Madame Nana stood to speak, her usual regal bearing now completely restored, her disguise cast off. Gasps of shock rippled through the crowd as realization dawned. Yes, I was the one cleaning your floors, she began, voice low but full of authority. I watched not your faces, but your hearts. I saw who you are when you believe no one of importance is watching. Her words fell like stones into water, sending tremors across the assembled staff. Some of you proved yourselves generous, respectful, considerate of others, no matter their station. Others revealed something much less admirable. Her gaze lingered on Linda and Anita, who squirmed, fidgeting in their seats like children caught stealing from the kitchen. She called Wendy to stand beside her. Facing all assembled, Madame Nana let her voice soften. Wendy, you showed a heart full of courage, redemptive humility, and kindness, qualities worth far more than pearls or diamonds. If my son is wise, he will seek not only beauty in a woman, but substance. You have both. Kwame, surprised but deeply moved, stood and gently took Wendy's hand. The crowd murmured their blessings, and Madame Nana took comfort in the peace that warmed her from within. Her tests were over. The right choice at last was clear. As the shock of Madame Nana's revelation swept through the room, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. Some staff members glanced nervously at one another, recalling every careless word, every sneer and side-eye they had thrown the cleaner's way. Linda and Anita sat rigid, the foundation of their certainty crumbling beneath them. They realized, perhaps for the first time, how exposed their true selves were when the veil of social hierarchy was lifted. Madame Nana's words echoed far beyond the company's walls. Employees whispered in hallways. Families discussed the story over evening meals. And even competitors in the business world found themselves intrigued by the rumor that the company's matriarch had posed as a humble cleaner. Some saw it as an eccentric display of authority, others as an act of wisdom and foresight. But those who knew Madame Nana best recognized something more personal, a mother's devotion and an unwavering quest for authenticity. For the first time, Linda and Anita tasted what it was like to be outsiders, feeling the heat of judgment from those who once watched them with envy. They tried to regain their composure, to feign innocence, but the damage was done. Their ambitions, which had soared on wings of vanity, came crashing down in the face of the matriarch's unvarnished truth. They muttered apologies, hoping their regret would be enough to salvage their reputations. But Madame Nana was unmoved by empty words. Amidst the swirl of gossip and regret, Wendy stood quietly, her face reflecting both humility and surprise. Unlike Linda and Anita, she hadn't competed for the matriarch's affections or positioned herself for social ascent. Her kindness had been spontaneous, her respect for humanity unwavering. Now, as the truth emerged, colleagues approached her with newfound respect, their past judgments softening in the warm wash of her gentle character. Outside the company walls, the story sowed seeds of transformation. Young professionals, inspired by Wendy's example, began to challenge the superficial measures of value that governed their own circles. Small groups started lunchtime initiatives to help cleaners and service staff, recognizing that real leadership began with compassion. Madame Nana's experiment had triggered a ripple effect, challenging the wider community to reconsider its most basic assumptions about dignity and belonging. But for Madame Nana, this was only the beginning. She knew that changing hearts was a slow and uncertain art. The path to a kinder future, for her family and the world they influenced, was still lined with obstacles. With the chamber emptying after the meeting, Linda and Anita hesitated, torn between pride and shame. Eventually, moved by the gravity of their public exposure, they approached Madame Nana and Wendy, eyes cast nervously to the floor. Linda, voice quavering, was first to speak. "Madame, please! I'm truly sorry I let myself forget what matters." "I was wrong." Anita nodded in agreement, her bravado disarmed, now replaced with vulnerability. For the first time, both women showed a genuine regret, not for losing favor, but for the pain and disrespect they had caused. Madame Nana regarded them silently, her expression inscrutable. She had seen countless apologies in her life, some performed, others deeply felt. This moment felt real, touched by the genuine remorse of those who had seen their own reflection, darkened by pride and pettiness. She remembered her own youthful mistakes and the elders who had shown her mercy when she most needed it. Softly she replied, "Growth does not come from hiding mistakes, but from facing them. I accept your apology not for my sake, but for yours. Perhaps this will shape you into kinder, stronger women." Her words were stern, but not unkind, wrapping Linda and Anita in a mantle of forgiveness that both soothed and challenged them to do better. Wendy, ever generous, authored her own message. "Everyone deserves a chance to change. I hope we all treat each other with more care from now on." Her gesture was a lifeline, a gentle opportunity to step into new habits, to forge together a workplace that treasured humanity above all else. Thus, a new understanding was born, a fragile reconciliation, seated in humility and watered by genuine remorse. Linda and Anita, relieved and grateful, felt the first stirrings of transformation. Their future actions would either prove the sincerity of their regret or reveal the limits of their growth. The challenge was theirs, and all who watched quietly hoped they would rise to meet it. Beyond the walls of the company, Madame Nana's choice to forgive set another example for her community. Conversations blossomed among friends and strangers alike, exploring the complexity of forgiveness, its power to heal, its risk of being mistaken for weakness, and its ability to inspire growth where punishment never could. With tensions eased, Madame Nana saw her son Kwame drawn more and more to Wendy's side. Their connection, kindled at first by circumstance, now blossomed fully in the sunlight of truth. Madame Nana observed closely, measuring not just their words, but the subtle currents of affection and respect flowing between them. Kwame sought out opportunities to learn more about Wendy, her story, her family, her dreams for the future. Rather than being swayed by glamour or status, he was drawn to her honesty, resilience, and the rare depth of her empathy. Conversations between them were marked not by flirtation or performance, but by the gentle unraveling of hopes, disappointments, and aspirations. In Wendy, Kwame discovered a partner, not just in business, but in life, someone whose values, whose quiet strength, mirror his father's ideals and his mother's hopes. Wendy, meanwhile, found in Kwame a rare soul, humble, eager to learn, sincere in his desire to appreciate people for who they are. Their mutual respect matured into admiration, and admiration into a cautious longing. Both knew the path ahead was fraught with challenge, the eyes of relatives, the pressure of maintaining legacy, the ever-present risks that come with vulnerability. Madame Nana watched the seriousness with which her son approached this new chapter. She engaged him in long, candlelit conversations about love, responsibility, and the meaning of partnership. She shared her fears that he would be tempted by superficiality, that Wendy would be crushed by expectation, that the world would teach them to guard their hearts rather than open them. But she also offered her support. True love is not found, but built, she told him in a voice rich with wisdom and time. It's carved from courage, forgiveness, sacrifice. If you build a home on those stones, it will withstand the storms. Together, they began to imagine a future shaped by grace instead of grandeur, a home filled with laughter and gentleness, where old wounds healed and new hopes flourished. News of Kwame and Wendy's partnership spread through the family and neighborhood, igniting a flurry of excitement and anticipation. The upcoming engagement ceremony became a symbol, not only of union, but of renewal. People whispered about the unlikely love born from humility and kindness, and many looked forward to witnessing this extraordinary chapter in their community's journey. Preparations began in earnest. Madame Nana oversaw every detail, guiding the process with reverence and care. She insisted on rituals deeply rooted in their heritage, merging tradition with the freshness of new beginnings. The ancestral home was decorated with vibrant cloths and fresh flowers, the air thick with the scents of home-cooked meals and the laughter of relatives returning from distant lands. In the days surrounding the celebration, Wendy's story became legend. Young girls admired her, not for beauty or fortune, but for the courage that came with treating all with dignity. Women who had once envied Linda and Anita's style now found themselves inspired by Wendy's simplicity and authenticity. Couples who had struggled with their own divisions held hands more tightly, reminded by the story that love thrives where hearts are open and actions authentic. Linda and Anita attended the ceremony, humbled and changed. They watched Wendy greet guests with warmth, felt the quiet admiration she inspired, and realized that the greatest treasures, respect, love, trust, could not be bought, only earned. As Kwame and Wendy exchanged vows under a sky painted with stars, Madame Nana's eyes brimmed with tears of joy. The ceremony was more than an engagement. It was a celebration of values triumphing over vanity, of humility overcoming prejudice. Music soared, elders danced, children played at the edges of the crowd. Every note and movement a testament to the power of transformation. Through Wendy and Kwame's love story, the circle of forgiveness and new possibility expanded, reaching hearts that had long hungered for hope. When the festivities quieted and the guests dispersed under the sweeping dawn, Madame Nana finally embraced Wendy, her arms trembling with a mixture of pride and relief. She looked into Wendy's eyes and saw the reflection of generations. Women who had fought for dignity, men who had sacrificed for stability, and now the business empire that Madame Nana and her husband had built together now faced an era of stewardship, not just of profit, but of principle. As she formally handed over the reins to Kwame and Wendy, she gathered the family for one last conversation, a circle of wisdom, tradition, and guidance. She spoke of the lessons hidden in hardship, the value of humility, the essential kindness that sustains communities through the most brutal winds of change. Her voice was tender and strong as she blessed the young couple. Let this home be a beacon, not only of wealth, but of love and mercy. Lead not with power, but with empathy. In a world quick to judge, be slow to condemn. Build together not only a legacy of gold, but of hearts changed, lives elevated, futures brightened. Wendy, overcome with emotion, and Kwame, grounded by his mother's legacy, accepted the charge with gratitude and humility. They vowed to honor her values in every decision, to make the company not only bigger, but better, not only wealthier, but wiser. Employees who had once worked in fear now looked forward to days guided by respect and partnership. Customers and clients, once mere numbers, were reimagined as neighbors and friends. And so, the torch was passed, illuminating not just the corridors of business, but the pathways of life itself. Madame Nana watched as the next generation stepped boldly into the sunlight, hearts ready, hands joined, prepared to weave a legacy that would nourish their community for years to come. With the transition of leadership complete, Wendy and Kwame wasted no time in reshaping the company's ethos. They held a series of open meetings, inviting every staff member, cleaners, clerks, managers, and executives alike, to share their experiences, hopes, and grievances. Gone were the days when voices were dismissed because of job title or social status. Instead, there blossomed a new culture where every perspective mattered, echoing Wendy's belief that wisdom often springs from the most unexpected places. Wendy introduced a mentorship program, pairing younger, ambitious staff with seasoned veterans, including those who'd spent years working in the background, their insights ignored. At first, some were skeptical. Old habits die hard, and change can feel threatening. But gradually, trust grew. People found themselves learning not just technical skills, but the art of listening, empathy, and patience. The walls between departments began to crumble, replaced by a sense of common purpose. Kwame focused on business innovation, but always through the lens of community. He launched scholarship schemes and healthcare initiatives for employees' families. He encouraged suppliers and partners to adopt fair practices, prioritizing ethics over short-term gain. Every decision reflected the lessons learned from his mother's tests, that prosperity means little without compassion, and success is hollow unless it's shared. The company's reputation soared, not only in profit reports, but in the stories told by those who worked there. External observers marveled at how a simple experiment, a matriarch's disguise, a cleaner's humility, could trigger such sweeping reform. Soon, other businesses began to emulate their model. The Nana principle, as some called it, became shorthand for leadership rooted in respect and inclusion. Madame Nana, now enjoying her well-earned retirement, often visited the bustling headquarters. Watching her legacy thrive in new hands, she saw not merely growth, but transformation. A garden where seeds of kindness planted long ago had begun to bloom in abundance. Linda and Anita didn't disappear into obscurity after their humiliating lesson. Instead, they embarked on heartfelt, personal journeys of growth and redemption. Linda, deeply marked by the matriarch's words and Wendy's forgiveness, enrolled in community service programs, volunteering on weekends to help organize food drives and literacy workshops. She began to understand that prestige and praise are fleeting, but the satisfaction of genuine contribution endures. Anita, inspired by Wendy's resilience in the face of ridicule, signed up for courses in emotional intelligence and mentorship. She sought guidance from elders and colleagues, swallowing her pride to learn humility. Gradually, her former arrogance was replaced by a quiet, steady determination to make amends, not just to those she had wronged, but to herself. Both women faced skepticism from peers. Some believed their kindness was but a mask, worn until favor was restored. Nevertheless, Linda and Anita pressed on, determined to let repeated actions, not platitudes, define their new paths. Over time, co-workers began to notice the shift. Where once there had been sarcasm and gossip, There now opened genuine conversations and teamwork. Wendy, meanwhile, did not withhold her friendship. She encouraged their better angels, celebrated their progress, and reminded them, as she had been reminded herself, that life is best lived in pursuit of improvement, not perfection. She became not only their advocate, but their ally, showing that grace need not be reserved for the blameless. Through the growing bond among these former adversaries, the office matured into a place of second chances, a crucible of self-forgiveness and transformation. Madame Nana watched, her heart swelling each time she saw a smile exchanged between those who had once crossed swords with cruelty, but now forged links with empathy. The story of Madame Nana's test soon transcended the boundaries of company and community. It was retold in schools, discussed in religious gatherings, and dissected in business seminars across the region. Elders wove it into the fabric of evening tales, using the narrative as a living lesson for children. Don't judge by appearances, but seek the truth of a person's heart. Learn from Wendy and Kwame, and from Madame Nana's wisdom. Young professionals cited the story as inspiration in job interviews and career planning. Teachers asked students, what qualities made a true leader, referencing Wendy's compassion and Kwame's humility. Parents shared the tale as an antidote to vanity and prejudice, instilling in their children the conviction that dignity lies not in riches or beauty, but in character. Even neighboring companies felt the impact. CEOs and HR managers hosted workshops on ethical leadership, opening conversations about the dangers of status obsession and the undervaluing of invisible workers. Business schools incorporated the story into their curriculum, teaching future generations the vital lesson Madame Nana had worked so hard to prove. Wendy found herself invited to speak at conferences, sharing not just her journey, but practical steps for fostering inclusion and empathy at work. Her voice, once small and tentative, now carried across auditoriums, its strength drawn from the lifetime of overcoming and serving quietly. Kwame often sat beside her, offering gentle encouragement, showing by example that loving partnership is built on mutual support. Through the power of shared story, the world around them grew just a little softer, a little stronger, a little wiser. Madame Nana's legacy rippled far beyond business and family. It became woven into the very routine and promise of everyday life. Years passed, and the values born of Madame Nana's test endured. Wendy and Kwame became not only leaders in their company, but mentors and role models for their entire community. Their relationship weathered inevitable storms, not because adversity ceased, but because their foundation was built on trust, kindness, and shared purpose. The culture of their business slowly transformed neighboring enterprises. Employees knew that their dignity would be protected, that their voices would be heard. New policies codified respect as the standard, not the exception. Retirees were honored for their wisdom, newcomers welcomed regardless of origin. Madame Nana herself was invited to speak at events honoring female leadership and mother's wisdom. She counseled that true power lies not in authority alone, but in the willingness to look beyond the veil of status. The real test, she told one audience, is not whom you impress when all eyes are watching, but whom you uplift when no one expects it. Linda and Anita, now respected members of the team, played crucial roles in sustaining the inclusive culture. They taught others from their own mistakes, showing how humility and redemption can change even the hardest hearts. Their evolution was a reminder to all that transformation is always possible if only one is willing to face the truth, accept forgiveness, and choose compassion. Each year, the business celebrated an Empathy Day, inviting cleaners, cooks, administrators, and clients to share their stories. The day served as a living memorial to Madame Nana's test, ensuring that every new generation would remember leadership is not about being served, but about serving, and love is the greatest mechanic of change. As Madame Nana grew older, she spent more time in her garden, surrounded by the laughter of grandchildren, friends, and neighbors. The vibrance of her legacy unfurled across fields and boardrooms, carried in every act of kindness, every spark of dignity preserved in her wake. She watched Wendy and Kwame raise a family, children who learned from both stories and example that compassion and courage are the roots of greatness. The company continued to thrive, its success deeper than financial reports, richer than any trophy or title. It was founded and forever sustained on the golden promise that hearts matter most. Community celebrations became annual rites of renewal, honoring not just profit or achievement, but the simple, powerful act of seeing one another. Stories of Madame Nana's experiment passed from grandparent to grandchild, touching souls who might never meet the matriarch herself, but who knew her by the grace living around them. The world outside remained imperfect, a mixture of hope and hardship, peace and struggle. But in this small corner, a new tradition grew strong. Whenever someone doubted their worth or questioned whether kindness could survive the fires of ambition, they needed only recall the test and its lessons. In that memory, they found the strength to persevere, to forgive, to transform. And so with every ending, there was a new beginning. A message handed on in laughter, work, and love. In the quiet, radiant way of lived wisdom, Madame Nana's legacy would never fade. It would live in every humility chosen over pride, every dignity restored, every heart uplifted, even in the smallest act of seeing beneath the surface to what truly matters.